It may very well be one of the most dangerous rallies that Donald Trump has ever given, and a sign of what's to come if he runs in 2024. The former president speaking to supporters in Texas, essentially calling for another insurrection if he ever faces charges in the multiple investigations into him, his business, or his coup attempt.
If these radical, vicious, racist prosecutors do anything wrong or illegal, I hope we are going to have in this country the biggest protest we have ever had in Washington, D.C., in New York, in Atlanta, and elsewhere, because our country and our elections are corrupt. They're corrupt.
That is a lie. And to boot, he also brought race into his imaginary slight.
As a result of that statement, overnight, the Fulton County District Attorney, one of the prosecutors referred to by Trump, who was investigating his efforts to overturn the election results in Georgia, she asked the FBI to provide security for buildings and staff. Now, Trump also put out a statement overnight that more or less admitted that he did want Pence to overturn the election. Joining us now, CNN political commentator S.E. Cupp and CNN chief legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. Trump did three things over the weekend, and I want to discuss each if we can. Number one, that call to arms, the biggest protest we've ever seen. Number two, he dangled pardons. And then number three, that statement where he basically said, yes, I wanted Pence to overturn the election results, not that there are any doubt. Jeffrey, I want to start with the call for the biggest protest ever, which many look at and say, hey, he's inciting violence in broad daylight.
Well, it's not exactly news that Donald Trump doesn't change, but Donald Trump doesn't change. And, what's so remarkable about this statement is that it almost is identical to what he said right before the riot at the Capitol. That, it walks up to the line of calling for violence. The implication is to call for violence, but he doesn't exactly say he's calling for violence. However, his supporters understand exactly what he's saying, and he's calling for violence. So, we've all been warned. And we'll see what happens, as he liked to say.
What do you think, S.E.?
Well, we know he's very good at turning Americans against each other. He did that in his, campaign for president in 2015. He did it throughout his presidency, and he's still doing it. And we talk a lot about his ego and the need to be adored and see his power in evidence, but we talk a little less about his affinity for anarchy. And part of this is he just loves to see it. He loves to see it burn. He loves breaking with social norms for the sake of it. He loves the disruption, striking a match and watching it burn. We saw that on January 6th. We've seen it a few times. And I think this is more of that. And whether someone gets arrested or injured or killed in the process really isn't his concern, because he's here for the anarchy. That's how little he loves this country. He's willing to break it for his ego, but also his desire to watch it fall apart.
Jeffrey, it's also notable that in that statement we just heard, he called the prosecutors racist, which, of course, the thing that they have in common, each of the three people he's talking about, is they're black. But I don't know, what do you think he's getting at there?
Well, I think he's just inciting racial division. I mean, he's pointing out that his prosecutors are black, and presumably he's asserting that they are after him because he's white. But I think it's mostly just stirring up his supporters for racial resentment, which is something he's done throughout his career, long before he was president, and I think that's the beginning and end of his agenda.
Yeah, he's trying, S.E., to sow a persecution complex, which we've seen it can be very effective. We're seeing that as part of the strategy, not just in this speech, but in a number of things that Trump and the GOP are pursuing to motivate voters.
Well, yeah, I mean, part of the cultism of Trump is obviously he's the central figure, nothing else matters. Including like democracy and the future of the country. And he has to be a victim as much as a strong man. It's a very odd dichotomy, but it's very common to cult leaders and dictators that they are always in the line of fire of these imaginary boogeymen. and they need their followers to sort of go off and chase them. But that they are also, right, the strongest guy in the room, or, you know, the most powerful person that's ever lived at the same time. It's sort of preposterous, but this is a very common pattern among cult-like figures.
I want to play a little bit more of what Trump said. And this has legal implications. This is, Jeffrey, where he seems to dangle pardons. And again, we've been here before. Listen.
If I run and if I win, we will treat those people from January 6th fairly. We will treat them fairly. And if it requires pardons, we will give them pardons because they are being treated so unfairly.
So not just the moral implication, Jeffrey, of pardoning people who stormed the Capitol, but also the impact on these investigations and prosecutions happening right now.
Right. This is why it's considered so wrong for presidents to dangle pardons, because it changes the nature of the investigations. If you are a defendant who is considering cooperating, who is considering pleading guilty, but then you hear the president of the United States say, well, don't worry, you can just get a pardon later. You think, well, I'll string the process out. I won't cooperate. I won't plead guilty because the president is going to come to my rescue later. Now, obviously, no one knows if he's going to be president again, but the possibility of a pardon is something that will have a material impact on the investigation. And look, he's done it before, as you pointed out. He pardoned Steve Bannon. He pardoned all his cronies towards the end of his term, his first term as president. And there's every reason to believe that he'll pardon more in the future, and that will affect how the current investigation goes.
What do you think, Essie?
Right, and Jeffrey's completely right, and that's the legal side. But it's worse. And again, to look at Trumpism as a cult, you want to look at these people and shake them and say, Donald Trump doesn't care about you. Donald Trump doesn't care whether you storm the Capitol, get arrested, get injured, die, in fact, as long as you're doing it all in the service of his name. He didn't bail anyone out of jail for what they did on January 6th. He's not paying any of their legal fees. In fact, he's taking donor money to pay for his legal fees. So this goes to the cultism of Trump. These people would jump off a bridge if he told them to. And this is encouraging them to, potentially commit more crimes in his name, because in the end, he'll be on their side. He won't be. He does not care. He uses his own voters and fans.
And he isn't, Jeffrey, president anymore. There are, as you know, political observers who look and say, actually, Donald Trump, while he still has a big hold on the party, his power is waning. And so I wonder if someone would actually say, oh, this guy can give me a pardon when he is not president.
Well, that's true, but he might be. And as someone who has underestimated Donald Trump politically in the past, I don't want to do it again. And he may, and he's certainly talking like he's running again, and he may win. But the whole point of not dangling pardons is that it interferes with the administration of justice. And yes, it's true he might not be president, but I mean, again, I think Essie is so right about this, that it's all about him. And the tragedy for his supporters, and if you read the interviews with some of the the FBI agents, interviews of these people arrested on January 6th, some of these people say, I wanted to help Trump. I thought we were doing what he wanted, and he has done nothing for them ever, including paying the legal fees of the people closest to him. He doesn't even do that. So it's just because he might not become president, it doesn't mean that this isn't an attempt to interfere with the legal system.